All right, welcome everyone to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a massively high-stakes, fast-moving global scenario that connects four of the absolute heaviest hitters on the world stage: the US, China, Russia, and Iran. Now, if you follow the news, you know there's the stuff that makes the front page, and then there's the real game, the complex, interconnected chess moves happening totally behind the scenes. Well, we're going to break down recent reports and analysis that reveal exactly that: a massive geopolitical chess match playing out literally right now, involving everything from hypersonic missile tests to super-secret backroom diplomatic trades. So get focused, because the stakes here, they genuinely could not be higher. To really grasp the current tension, we have to start with a seriously bizarre question. So picture this. Donald Trump recently traveled to China for this huge high-stakes trade summit, right? He brings along top CEOs, his inner circle, the whole shebang, to negotiate tariffs and, crucially, to pressure China regarding Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. But right in the dead center of these super delicate meetings, Russia suddenly test-fires its most powerful nuclear missile. I mean, why? Why choose that exact specific moment? Well, according to the source material we're digging into today, that was absolutely no coincidence.
Section 1. Putin's hypersonic warning shot.
Okay, let's dive into this. Analysts are pointing out that Vladimir Putin's sudden missile test was a highly deliberate message. It was meant to completely derail the diplomatic maneuvering happening over in Beijing and to fire a massive, blunt warning shot regarding U.S. plans in the Middle East. To get why it's such a big deal, we got to look at the hardware. We're talking about the RS-28 Sarmat, an intercontinental ballistic missile, and the source highlights a frankly staggering number. This thing travels at 25,000 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, military experts consider it way more advanced and powerful than China's DF-41 or the US Minuteman III. It is a hypersonic behemoth designed to basically blow right past current defense systems. But here is where the actual strategic intent starts to click into place. The Sarmat has a reported range of 35,000 kilometers. Now let's do a quick geographic reality check. Russia is currently locked in a massive, grinding conflict right next door in Ukraine. So if your primary military focus is Kyiv, why on earth do you test a missile that can fly 35,000 kilometers? You just don't need a weapon of that extreme caliber to strike a country you literally share a border with. And the sheer destructive capability of this thing is, well, it's chilling. A single one of these missiles can reportedly carry up to 15 independent nuclear warheads. Yeah, 15. That means one single launch could theoretically hit 15 different targets all at the exact same time. So we're not talking about some tactical weapon for a regional border dispute. This is a strategic weapon designed for total global reach and catastrophic impact. So if he doesn't need it for his neighbor, who exactly is the audience for this test? Well, according to the source's geopolitical analysis, this was a direct, unmistakable warning to Washington, D.C. and New York. Putin's message is basically stay away from Iran and the Middle East. It's just a colossal flex of nuclear deterrence, meant to draw a huge red line protecting Russian interests and alliances in the Persian Gulf, right while the U.S. is actively trying to negotiate with China. Section 2. The Shadow War heats up. Now, what's really interesting about this is what's happening off the main stage. While ICBMs are getting tested out in the open, there is a much quieter, far more destructive conflict escalating right now. Behind the fancy diplomatic summits and the public posturing, a covert, tit-for-tat shadow war is heating up fast. You might see a news blurb about a refinery fire here or a drone strike there and think nothing of it. But the source material compiles these into a really clear, pretty alarming pattern. In just the last month alone, 10 to 12 Russian oil facilities were hit. At the exact same time, we saw 3 to 4 highly suspicious blasts at U.S. oil refineries. Throw in the ongoing, uncredited strikes on Iran's crucial oil hubs, like Karg and Kesh Islands, plus drone attacks near Abu Musa. Look, this is not a random string of accidents. It's a coordinated, global shadow war targeting the absolute lifeblood of these nations, their energy infrastructure. And make no mistake, this matters to all of us directly, because this is exactly the kind of instability that drives massive spikes in global energy prices and shakes up economic stability. And you better believe Iran is pushing back hard. Following these recent escalations, reports are showing that Iran has completely restocked its underground missile tunnels. They've reportedly fixed all the launch pad damage from previous skirmishes in just 2 months. But the absolute most alarming part? They are claiming to have 500 intercontinental ballistic missiles prepped and ready for immediate use, with officials literally stating they are, quote, ready for the biggest surprise attack. The rhetoric is very much matching the physical preparations here. Section 3. Backroom Deals. Taiwan for Hormuz. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive geopolitical game of give and take happening behind closed doors. With the shadow war raging and Iran arming to the teeth, diplomacy turns into a game of total secrecy and massive concessions. So when Trump's delegation, including those top CEOs and the Sun, sits down in Beijing, they aren't just haggling over basic trade tariffs. They are negotiating the geopolitical balance of the entire world. In international relations, it's always a matter of give and take. On one side of the scale, the U.S. desperately wants China to use its huge economic leverage over Iran to force the Strait of Hormuz open and push Iran into a brand new nuclear deal. But look at the flip side. What does China want? Taiwan. That is their primary focus. So the really profound question experts are asking right now is, would the U.S. quietly offer assurances or maybe ease pressure regarding Taiwan in exchange for China neutralizing that Iranian threat in the Middle East? And here's the crazy part. There might actually be evidence that these silent agreements are already in motion. The source points out a super fascinating recent anecdote. Right in the thick of all these high tensions, 6 to 10 Chinese oil tankers just sailed straight through the highly contested Strait of Hormuz, completely untouched by the U.S. Navy. Iran was perfectly happy to supply the oil, and the U.S. deliberately looked the other way. It's a pretty powerful indicator of how these back-channel neutralizations and selective enforcement actually dictate the rules in these international waters.
Section 4. A looming anti-Iran coalition. But, diplomacy always comes with a ticking clock. What happens if Iran just says no to these backroom maneuvers? What if they refuse to sign a new nuclear deal, no matter how hard China pressures them? Well, the source outlines the next phase of this strategy, a massive anti-Iran coalition. The strategy reportedly involves leaning heavily on both NATO allies and Arab nations to form a completely unified military front. You've got NATO countries like the UK, France, and Italy, who previously clashed with Trump, remember, now moving warships right toward the Strait of Hormuz. You have the UAE, protected by their Iron Dome systems, deploying Mirage jets. You have Saudi Arabia allegedly participating in those uncredited strikes on Iranian bases we talked about. And you have the United States leading the entire charge, conducting drone ops near critical Iranian islands. It is a highly organized, very deliberate tightening of the military noose.
So how does Iran react to this giant unified front bearing down on them? According to the source, they actually aren't surprised at all. In fact, this scenario is the very core of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's doctrine. Iranian leaders like IRGC chief Ahmed Vahidi have operated for years under the strict, grim assumption that they can rely on absolutely no one. Their entire military apparatus has been built around one incredibly dark philosophy: prepare to fight the final war entirely alone. They aren't waiting for a savior to show up, they are dug in. Section 5, bypassing Congress, the 60-day clock. Let's move to the home front and see how this builds. Because launching a massive coalition war isn't just about international maneuvering. There is a huge domestic hurdle in the United States. A really significant chunk of the American public and a heavily divided Congress simply do not want a prolonged, bloody war with Iran. Navigating around that requires a pretty fascinating legal trick. Step 1, the administration officially announces the end to the current military operation, which was known as Epic Fury. Step 2, they immediately turn around and launch a brand new, legally distinct initiative, reportedly called Operation Sledgehammer. Step 3, by doing this, they theoretically reset the war powers clock. That legally secures them another 60 days of combat operations without needing a single vote of approval from Congress. It's basically a sledgehammer loophole to keep the military engine running without getting bogged down in domestic politics. Which brings us full circle right back to the beginning and to Vladimir Putin. Because Russia is absolutely refusing to let the U.S. consolidate power in the Middle East uncontested. According to the source, Putin has drawn a very hard line, essentially stating, Russia stands with Iran, we will hold your uranium. He views an attack on Iran as a direct challenge to Russia's own borders and its sphere of influence. So that hypersonic missile test we opened with, that wasn't just some random display. It was a loud, clear promise that Russia is an active, heavily armed player on this board. We've seen the 35,000-kilometer missile tests, the secret shadow war on oil refineries, the massive backdoor trades over Taiwan and Hormuz, and the looming threat of Operation Sledgehammer. The pieces are all in motion, and the stakes are genuinely existential. So I'm going to leave you with this final, absolutely critical thought based on everything we've unpacked today. What happens when 4 nuclear-capable superpowers, the US, China, Russia, and Iran, all simultaneously refuse to back down? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.